People who allow the spirit to manifest itself occasionally in their lives achieve amazing success. People who allow the spirit to coexist equally with the mundane consciousness become geniuses. People whose spirit dominates the mundane consciousness are what we call saints. The wise say that man is a magical creature. This is a fact that does not require any proof for the wise. But why then can so few people realize their magical potential with which everyone is born and become happy? Because there is something that prevents a person from living the life that is his true purpose. This something is called by magicians the predator or mundane consciousness. How to defeat the predator and free yourself from its influence. We will tell you about it now. One of the first to openly tell a wide audience about predators was Carlos Castaneda. Being not only a mystical writer, but also a magician and warrior of the spirit, Carlos Castaneda wrote in his books about some aggressive and evil creatures that feed on human energy and devour their luminous shell. The fact is that magicians, according to Carlos Castaneda, perceive current energy flows in the world directly and see a person at the energy level as a luminous cocoon. The luminosity of the cocoon or human shell indicates that the individual is able to perceive events occurring in the world, analyze and respond to them in the necessary way. By devouring a person's luminous shell, predators deprive him of the ability to adequately perceive reality and interact with the outside world in a reasonable and effective way. Thus, a person deprived of the ability to reasonably relate to his life becomes food for predators and is their prey and energy supplier. Where did predators come from and why do they feed on human energy? Castaneda only gives hints to such questions in his books. He writes that sorcerers have long noticed predators and perceive them as part of our universe, to which sorcerers also attribute predatory properties. Predators are a given in our world like the sunrise or the blue sky. Sorcerers say that man, thanks to his ability to recognize and perceive energy flows in the form of tangible objects in the world, has a specific glow that is inherent only to man in nature and which attracts predators and is for them something like a pleasant delicacy or a favorite dessert. Castaneda himself perceived predators as shadows flickering in the darkness at great speed and filling all the dark space. Thanks to the magical gift that Castaneda had developed thanks to his teacher Don Juan, Carlos was able to see predators, and every time he interacted with predators, he experienced acute physical discomfort, panic, and severe dizziness. This condition was intensified by the awareness of the magical and terrifying fact revealed to Castaneda by Don Juan. According to Carlos's teacher, predators turned man into an obedient slave and battery in order to freely access his luminosity and feed on it. To do this, predators performed a terrifying maneuver on man, forcing the latter to think like a predator, act like a predator, and see the world like a predator. In other words, predators implanted their minds in man. In this way, they stole the life of every human on earth, making everyone a source of food and a generator of the luminosity that they devour. Man has long lived the life of a predator, being its food, and has long ceased to belong to himself. But what if we tell you that Carlos Castaneda, looking at the shadows darting about at great speed, saw not something external but the structure of his consciousness, which is characteristic of any ordinary person? And what if we reveal a secret to you, saying that the predator lives not outside but inside a person? To understand what is being said, it is necessary to take a few small steps away from the narrative and consider the structure of man as sorcerers see it. Try to concentrate on your ability to perceive the world abstractly and, with the help of controlled imagination, to imagine and admit into your consciousness what we will tell you about further. Magicians know that each person is not just a body, but a triple structure consisting of spirit, soul, and body. In other words, magic teaches that each person is not a conglomerate of chemical elements collected according to an unknown law into a physical body and subject to biological rhythms, but an immortal essence that has incarnated into this body. The immortal essence is the spirit, which, according to magicians, lives in eternity. combining intellect and feelings, the human soul in the magical understanding is a conductor that absorbs the experience of awareness during physical life. In other words, the body is a material and mysterious instrument in the hands of the immortal spirit, which, with the help of the soul, collects the experience lived by a person in the material world during physical incarnation on earth. In this case, magicians say that the soul and body are in the power of a predator, which they call mundane consciousness. According to the magical vision, true consciousness or spirit and mundane consciousness are in constant confrontation. Having mastered consciousness and captured the soul and body, the predator replaces the guidance of the spirit in man, and thereby drowns out the voice of eternity and the divine immortal source, which is essentially man. In the power of mundane consciousness, due to impulsiveness and a superficial worldview, no one is able to reveal their magical potential, thereby living a life that is beneficial to the predator and which makes man convenient food for it. This means that, being in mundane consciousness, a person loses such a quality as thoughtfulness, which is capable of leading him to the awareness of his inner nature. Without the depth of awareness of himself as a part of the world, an individual spends his limited supply of energy recklessly, and this supply becomes insufficient to discover his destiny. In this case, magicians say that the predator has eaten the luminosity of the human cocoon. One of the fundamental laws of magic states that only in true consciousness, under the guidance of the spirit, can a person regain control over his soul and body. Living in harmony with himself and the world through the influence of the spirit on life, the individual finds the meaning of life and reveals the magical potential within himself. Of course, when working with new ideas, it is necessary to interact with those for whom such ideas have become part of their lives, but such people may not be around. By the way, for this purpose we created the Three Suns Closed Club, in which, together with the participants, we touch upon the unknown sides of both the spiritual nature of man and the unsolved mysteries of the world and the cosmos. It is the Three Suns Closed Club that helps to find like-minded people and begin to perceive the world better, clearer, and deeper. In the Closed Club, we publish all necessary information, links to films, books, scientific articles, etc. that will help you to get personal enlightenment. In case you want to join us in the Three Suns Closed Club and learn to perceive new ideas and begin to develop magical thinking that will enrich your life, we will leave a link in the description of the video. But how to confront the predator? Is there a tool with which each person can defend himself against the aggressive attacks of the energy-destroying mundane consciousness? Yes, without a doubt. Such a tool is discipline. Don Juan did not define discipline as the ability to wake up at 5 in the morning and douse himself with cold water until exhaustion. For sorcerers, discipline is the ability to steadfastly endure adverse circumstances that are not part of one's calculations. What does it mean? In its most common sense, the word discipline comes from the Latin word discipulos, which means one who is taught. This fact suggests that discipline is not a physical, intellectual quality of a person, which is determined by the conviction to repeat the same programmed actions over a given period of time. Discipline is the ability to constantly comprehend the world through training from the intellectual and sensory sides, striving for harmony with nature through a clear awareness of a deep unity with it. The unimaginable palette of the diversity of nature's mysteries, cognized by a person on the intellectual and sensory levels, is capable of preventing the consciousness from becoming fixed on the aggressive principles of a predator and protecting a person from its provocations. Thus, any individual is able to regain control over his own life. But from whom should one learn? Mystical philosophy teaches that the only teacher in a person's life is his spirit, the immortal and intangible essence which gains experience during successive incarnations on earth. By building the subtlest connection with his spirit and learning from it to see the world through the eyes of eternity, a person gently and gradually transfers control of his life from the mundane consciousness to the true one. In this way, any individual fences off and protects himself from the principles of the predator, manifested in his consciousness and in the consciousness of the people around him, and reveals his own predestination, receiving in his palms a gift from eternity, which is called destiny. Therefore, we can safely say that discipline is the ability to hear your own spirit and overcome earthly concerns, looking at them from the scale of the universe. Discipline allows the spirit to restore the luminosity of the human shell and move away from the mundane consciousness, learning the world in all its diversity and depth. This is what Don Juan meant when he said that discipline makes a person's energy shell inedible to predators. Friends, there is a separate material on our channel in which we tell you how to reveal such a magnificent quality as discipline in yourself. Study the practice of revealing discipline proposed by the research team of our project and reveal the consciousness of your immortal spirit in yourself. We will leave a link to the corresponding video in the description. Discipline reveals such a quality in a person as responsibility. The word responsibility comes from the word response. To be responsible means to respond to your spirit on its subtlest impulses and to build your life according to your purpose. Accepting responsibility for your life is one of the key conditions for getting rid of personal history. Since a person is in the power of mundane consciousness from birth, almost all of his personal history is not a consequence of a deep and harmonious attitude to the world, but the history of a predator who lived in a human body. It was this fact that scared Castaneda to the depths of his soul after Don Juan told him about predators. To consolidate personal history means to obey the command of predator, which limits the perception of the inner abyss and infinity that resides in the human heart. Thus, mundane consciousness does not allow a person to perceive the spirit and remember his divine origin. By anchoring personal history with stories about oneself, the life of an individual is built around his lower self, which becomes its active center. At the same time, the owner of a personal history spends enormous energy potential to create an image of himself in the eyes of others and the image of others in his own eyes. The center of life must be the spirit, which is capable of filling life itself with purpose and meaning, freedom and ease. This is how a person reveals his purpose and escapes the power of the predator. Each individual is an embodied force of the universe in a physical body with infinite potential. The principle of the predator limits perception to the size of personal history and surrounding circumstances. Thus, a person does not reveal his inner magical potential and gets lost among everyday things and events. This is the true influence of personal history. It forces you to be a bearer of ideas and patterns about yourself and your nature, spending enormous energy resources on this, which in essence should be spent by you on revealing a subtle and intangible connection with the spirit. A reckless attitude towards life and energy is destructive and exhausts a person. Magicians say that in this case the radiance and luminosity of the human cocoon are eaten by predators. The more openly and violently an individual expresses complaints and grievances, both to his own person and to the world in general, into which he was lucky enough to be born, the stronger the personal history becomes fixed. Instead of correcting the situation and changing his life for the better, a person is exhausted by constant discontent, essentially doing nothing and not changing the situation in any way. This process is called indulgence in the books of Carlos Castaneda. To indulge means to waste energy, to fix one's personal history through complaints and to feed the predator, giving it control of one's own life. Unfulfilled hopes, complaints, and a false perception of the world create a source of pain in a person, in which the predator hides. Fear prevents a person from seeing this source of pain. It is through pain and fear that the predator builds and implements its most insidious manipulations, forcing everyone to feel sorry for themselves and tyrannize those around them. Pain is the home of the predator. Personal history feeds pain. Pain feeds the predator. Therefore, the predator is interested in spreading personal history, because in essence, personal history is the border of predator's tyranny. These borders need to be reduced because maintaining personal history reduces the energy potential. Infinity inside a person needs energy and space to incarnate in the outside world and return to oneself the knowledge of one's own magical nature, to award oneself a fate worthy of the gods themselves. But the trouble is that this is far from all that the mundane consciousness does to a person. Over time, any predator becomes a scavenger. A scavenger is an extreme manifestation of the base desires of the mundane consciousness, which makes a person expect indulgences, beg, and constantly complain. A scavenger clings indiscriminately to everything that comes his way and eats scraps from the table of other predators, constantly waiting for a handout. A scavenger does not interact with the spirit and is constantly waiting for someone to weaken enough to take everything from him. A scavenger experiences fear and trembling before other predators, dreaming of their power, strength, and aggression, of their fate and place in the sun. A scavenger is a person who tyrannizes himself and everyone around him, whose noble creative principle is paralyzed by pain and fear, hiding behind constant complaints, grievances, and claims. The purpose of any person is to go to their spirit and create for the benefit of all mankind. The fate of any predator is the path to the life of a scavenger, living in constant fear, submission, and servility, and tyrannizing those who turned out to be weaker than themselves. To escape the influence of a predator, you need to reject the pain. See that this is the pain of a predator and not personal pain. The spirit of a person will never force you to experience torment. The spirit will give clarity and strength for creation and an understanding of how to realize one's own magical potential. The scavenger and the predator live in pain and constant fear, while the magician abides in the spirit and lives in infinity, where there are no grievances or claims. Evil dies in eternity. For the human spirit, eternity is the reason for its development, flowering, and fragrance. You may ask, since man is so powerful, why doesn't he just get rid of the predator and destroy him? To avoid this, the predator used the greatest and most devastating trick on man. Mundane consciousness deprives one of awareness. In order to manifest itself in life, the spirit requires complete awareness from man. Through awareness, the spirit gently, tactfully, and carefully changes man's life, building it in accordance with the laws and harmony of the universe. Conscious interaction with the spirit is called intention in magic. With the help of intention, everyone is able to change their life in accordance with their destiny. Since true consciousness directs man to unity with everything in the universe, and unlike the parochialism and short-sightedness of mundane consciousness, perceives everyone as part of the great unity, the right intention always concerns not only the man himself but all people. To awaken the spirit within oneself, it is necessary to help people get rid of the dictatorship and oppression of mundane consciousness. To succeed in defeating the predator and its principles, we present you with a practice for getting out from under the influence of the predator. With this practice, you will be able to regain control over your own life and boldly move towards your own destiny. Stop maintaining a personal history. This does not mean getting rid of a personal history entirely. This is not required of an ordinary person whose life is closely intertwined with social obligations. To stop maintaining a personal history, you need to, firstly, stop talking about the past. This will stop the expansion of the boundaries and the increase in the volume of your personal history. Also, if you stop telling others about your past and remembering the past, you will feel how the energy you spent on fixing it in your personal history is freed up for the magic of the present and the greatness of the future. Secondly, stop complaining and taking offense. Complaining and taking offense are a powerful tool for fixing a personal history. Through complaints, you focus on what you are unhappy with and not on ways to overcome your dissatisfaction and change the conditions in which you find yourself. You can feel offended, but do not allow yourself to be offended. If a yard dog barks at you, you can feel offended, but it will be pointless to be offended at it. Freedom from complaints and grievances will return the energy you spent on fixing your personal history and will allow you to concentrate on developing your best qualities in order to get to know yourself from new sides. Thirdly, when meeting people, listen more than talk. Since a person is used to talking about himself, excessive talkativeness gives rise to inattention to everything that does not concern his own personal history. It is necessary to listen attentively to what others say. Try to recognize and hear in people the voice of infinity and the call of their spirit through stories. This maneuver will open you to the vision of how personal history significantly narrows people's perception of reality. Observing this process in others, you will recognize it in yourself and will be able to reduce the negative impact of fixing your personal history on your development as a spiritual being. Look into the pain that hides behind your personal history. See how this pain controls you. In fact, through pain, a predator controls you using fear for this. In order to neutralize the influence of mundane consciousness, do not appropriate pain and recognize in it something alien to your spirit. The pain is not yours, but the predator inside you. Therefore, stop being afraid to look into the pain inside you. Realize that in every person, the predator lives precisely in the internal pain. Try to feel that there is no personal pain. There is the pain of a predator, implanted in people through their personal histories. The true tragedy is that a person chooses the mundane consciousness in himself and does not use the true consciousness of the spirit. This is the root of human suffering and the reason for his fears. Strive to help everyone get rid of pain. In this way, you will overcome the influence and dictate of mundane consciousness and get rid of constant painful internal experiences. Ask the Spirit for help and support. Recognize the subtlest divine principle in yourself. Realize that your personal history does not belong to you. You are not your personal history. It is better to use meditation practices for this. One of such practices is the practice of connecting with the Sun Ra, published on our channel. At the end of the meditation, turn out loud to your spirit, voice your desire to serve your spirit, and trust your divine principle to manage your life. The spiritual light of the divine essence will force the predator to retreat, for darkness dissolves upon contact with light. You came to this earth not to accumulate personal history, but to fulfill your destiny. Your destiny is the path that has a heart. This is the path that Carlos Castaneda wrote about in his books. Each person is sure that he lives his life and experiences his feelings. Magic says that human consciousness is captured by a predator, which takes over control of life and energetically drains the individual. To get rid of the predator's consciousness, it is necessary to stop maintaining a personal history. Look into the inner pain and ask for help from your spirit. Freeing yourself from mundane consciousness, a person gains true freedom, which Carlos Castaneda wrote about. A free person is able to create and build for the benefit of all mankind. By creating, anyone finds the meaning of life and becomes equal to the gods who patronize man from eternity itself. This is how, rising up to the spirit and realizing one's own task on this earth, everyone gains immortality.